The brewery was noisy, filled with the chatter of people unwinding after work. I sipped my IPA, half listening as Matt rambled about his new kayaking obsession. He'd always been the adventurous type, diving headfirst into every passing hobby. I envied that about him, his ability to embrace change without overthinking it. "You've been quiet, man," Matt said, his sharp eyes narrowing as he leaned across the table. "What's going on?" I sighed, swirling the beer in my glass. "It's Emily," I admitted. "She's been distant." Matt raised an eyebrow. "Distant how?" "Not in a fight or anything," I said quickly, not wanting to paint the wrong picture. "It's more like she's restless. She's been going out a lot with Nicole, staying late, coming back looking like she's lost in thought." Matt smirked. "Nicole Sanders? That woman practically breathes chaos. She probably has Emily convinced to climb Mount Rainier barefoot or something." I laughed despite myself. "It's not like that. It's just, I don't know, man. It feels like she's searching for something. And I don't think it's me." Matt took a sip of his beer, studying me for a moment. "You ever think about shaking things up? Surprising her with a trip or something? Sometimes women just need a little excitement, you know?" I nodded, considering his words. A getaway sounded like a good idea. Maybe it was exactly what we needed to reconnect. But later that night, Emily came home from one of her outings with Nicole, her expression a mix of hesitation and determination. She barely got her coat off before she said, "Ryan, can we talk?" I followed her to the couch, my stomach tightening. Something about her tone told me this wasn't just a casual check-in. I sat beside her, bracing myself for whatever was coming. "I've been thinking a lot lately," she began, her voice careful. "About us. About our marriage." My heart thudded in my chest. "Okay," I said slowly. "What about it?" Emily looked at me, her eyes soft but searching. "I love you, Ryan. You're a good husband, and I don't want you to think this is about you not being enough. But I've been feeling restless, like I'm stuck in a routine, and I think it's because I've been missing something." "Missing what?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. She hesitated, as if choosing her words carefully. "Nicole and I have been talking about unconventional ways to bring excitement back into a relationship, and she shared some things that she and Lila have tried." I blinked. "Unconventional how?" Emily bit her lip before saying, "They've opened up their marriage, given each other a little freedom to explore. And she says it's helped them feel closer, more alive." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "You're suggesting we open our marriage?" The words felt foreign in my mouth, like they didn't belong. "Not permanently," she said quickly. "Just to see what it's like. To see if it helps us grow together." I leaned back, running a hand through my hair. "Emily, this is a lot to take in." "I know," she said softly, "and I don't want you to feel pressured. I needed to say it out loud. To be honest with you, that night, after she'd gone to bed, I stayed up, staring at the ceiling. My mind churned with questions and doubts. Was this the beginning of the end, or could it be a chance to rediscover something we'd lost? I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that our marriage was changing, and I wasn't sure how to keep up. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what Emily had said. I went through the motions at work, typing lines of code while her words echoed in my head. To see if it helps us grow together. Was this really what she thought would bring us closer? Or was it just her excuse to look for something or someone else? At home, things felt normal, too normal, almost like she was trying to pretend the conversation hadn't happened. She cooked dinner, asked about my day, even curled up next to me on the couch to watch a movie. But underneath it all, I could feel the tension simmering. Every time she glanced at her phone or laughed at a text, my mind spiraled with questions. Finally, one evening, I decided I couldn't avoid it any longer. After dinner, I set my plate aside and looked her straight in the eye. "Emily," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "About what you said the other night." She froze for a moment, then set down her fork carefully. "Okay," she said, her tone cautious. "I'm listening. I've been thinking about it," I admitted, "and I still don't know how I feel. I don't want to lose you, but I'm not sure this is the way to fix things." Her shoulders sagged slightly, as if she'd been expecting me to say no. "I get that," she said quietly. "And I want you to know, Ryan, This isn't about me being unhappy with you. It's about me feeling like I've lost a part of myself. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. You think you'll find it by seeing other people? I don't know, she said honestly. But I know I can't keep ignoring this feeling. And I don't want to ignore it and let it grow into resentment. I'd rather be honest with you now than let it fester. Her honesty was disarming. I couldn't accuse her of being unfair or selfish when she was laying it all out for me like this. But that didn't make it easier to swallow. I need time, I said finally. She nodded. Of course. And if we're going to do this, I added, the words coming out reluctantly, I need to know it's not one-sided. If you're going to explore, then I need the same freedom. Emily's eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't considered that. But after a moment, she nodded. That's fair. Fair. The word felt hollow. Nothing about this felt fair. That night, I went to the gym to clear my head. I'd been slacking on workouts lately, but I needed something to focus on besides the chaos brewing in my mind. As I pushed through sets of weights, I caught sight of a trainer across the room. She was showing someone how to adjust the machine, her movements confident and precise. Something about her ease, her quiet self-assurance, struck me. When she walked past me, she smiled and said, "You've got good form." Don't see that often. It was such a simple comment, but it caught me off guard. Thanks, I replied, feeling strangely self-conscious. Sarah, she said, extending a hand. Ryan, I replied, shaking it. Her grip was firm, her smile warm. She didn't linger, just moved on to her next client. But for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of lightness. A reminder that maybe I wasn't as invisible as I'd started to feel. At home, Emily was on the couch, texting furiously. She looked up when I came in, her smile bright, but a little forced. Hey, she said. How was the gym? Good, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I didn't tell her about Sarah. Not because I was hiding anything, but because I wasn't sure what there was to tell. That night, as we lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling again, wondering if we were already drifting too far apart to find our way back. The next morning, Emily seemed more cheerful than usual, humming softly as she prepared coffee. I watched her from the kitchen doorway, trying to decide if this was her way of easing her own guilt or if she truly believed this new arrangement would fix things. You're in a good mood, I said, leaning against the doorframe. She looked up, her cheeks flushing slightly. I guess I'm just glad we talked. It feels like we're finally being honest. Yeah, I replied, though the word felt heavy on my tongue. As the days passed, Emily seemed to embrace the idea wholeheartedly. She started going out more often with Nicole, texting someone constantly when she was home. She didn't say much about who she was talking to, and I didn't ask. I figured it was part of the deal. We'd agreed to this, after all. But it wasn't easy. Each time she walked out the door, dressed a little nicer than usual, I felt a knot tighten in my chest. I tried not to let it show. I told myself I needed to give her space, just like I'd asked for. At the gym, Sarah became a regular presence in my routine. She had a way of making everyone around her feel comfortable, like they belonged. She'd offer tips on form, share stories about her hiking trips, and occasionally crack jokes that caught me off guard. It was easy, in a way that being with Emily hadn't felt in a long time. One evening, as I packed up to leave, Sarah stopped me near the locker room. Hey, a group of us is going on a hike this weekend. You should come. I hesitated. I'm not much of a hiker. She grinned. Perfect. That means you'll make everyone else look like pros. Seriously, it's just for fun. You could probably use a break. Her words hit closer to home than she realized. Yeah, I said finally. Maybe I could. That weekend, I found myself trudging up a muddy trail with Sarah and a handful of her friends. The air was crisp, the scent of pine and damp earth filling my lungs. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Glad you came? Sarah asked, falling in a step beside me. Yeah, I admitted. I think I needed this. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. Sometimes you just have to get out of your own head. You know? Stop thinking and just be. I glanced at her, surprised by how much sense she made. You sound like you've had practice. She laughed. Let's just say I've been there. A few years ago, I was in a relationship that felt stuck. Like I was running on a hamster wheel and going nowhere. What happened? I asked. I left, she said simply. It wasn't easy, but it was the right choice. Her honesty struck a chord. I wondered if Emily felt the same way, like she was running in circles with me. The thought made my chest ache. When I got home that evening, Emily was sitting on the couch, her legs tucked beneath her, scrolling through her phone. She looked up as I walked in, her smile faltering slightly. "How was the hike?" she asked. "It was good," I said, kicking off my shoes. "Nice to get outside for a change." "Good," she replied, her tone a little too bright. "Nicole and I went to this new rooftop bar. It was fun." I nodded, unsure what to say. The divide between us felt wider than ever. That night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Thanks for coming today. Hope you're feeling a little lighter." I stared at the message, torn between the comfort it offered and the guilt it stirred. I wanted to reply, to thank her for the escape, but something held me back. Instead, I set the phone down and turned off the light. Beside me, Emily shifted in her sleep, her breathing steady and calm. I wondered if she was dreaming of someone else the way I found myself thinking of Sarah. The next week passed in a blur of polite conversations and silent undercurrents between Emily and me. It felt like we were living two separate lives under the same roof, each testing the boundaries of this so-called experiment. At work, I buried myself in projects, grateful for the distraction. But even then, thoughts of Emily, of where she was, of who she might be with, kept creeping in. It didn't help that every now and then, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. She wasn't intrusive, just kind and supportive, asking how I was doing or sharing a funny story about her day. I found myself looking forward to her messages more than I cared to admit. One evening, I came home earlier than usual, thinking maybe Emily and I could have dinner together. The house was unusually quiet. Her car was in the driveway, but she wasn't in the kitchen or the living room. As I walked toward the hallway, I heard her voice, soft but unmistakably laughing. She was on the phone in the bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and as I approached, her words became clearer. "I had such a great time last night." "Yeah, me too. I can't wait to see you again." I stopped in my tracks. My pulse quickened, and for a moment, I couldn't move. The sound of her laughter, light and carefree, felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I backed away quietly, not wanting her to know I'd overheard. In the kitchen, I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat at the table, staring at the unopened bottle. My hands were shaking. Later that night, when she came out to the living room, her smile was soft and relaxed. She looked happy, almost glowing. Part of me wanted to confront her, to demand to know who she'd been talking to, but another part of me stopped myself. After all, wasn't this what we'd agreed to? "You're home early," she said, curling up on the couch. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just finished up at work and thought I'd come back." She nodded, then glanced at her phone. For the rest of the evening, we watched TV in silence, the distance between us palpable. The following weekend, Sarah invited me to another hike, this time a shorter trail with just the two of us. I hesitated, wondering if going would cross some invisible line, but in the end, I agreed. We met at the trailhead early in the morning. The air was cool, the sun just beginning to rise over the trees. Sarah greeted me with her usual easy smile. "I brought coffee," she said, handing me a thermos. "Thought you might need a boost." "Thanks," I said, grateful for the warmth. As we started up the trail, the conversation flowed naturally, shifting between light banter and deeper topics. At one point, we stopped to catch our breath, overlooking a small stream that wound through the forest. Sarah sat on a rock sipping her coffee. "You seem quieter today," she said, her tone gentle. "Just a lot on my mind," I admitted. "Emily?" she guessed. I nodded, staring at the water. "She's seeing someone, I think." I overheard her on the phone. Sarah didn't respond right away. When she did, her voice was careful. "What does that make you feel?" "Like I'm losing her," I said honestly. "And I don't know if I'm supposed to fight for her or just let it happen." Sarah set her coffee down and looked at me, her expression kind but firm. "Ryan, you don't have to have all the answers right now. But you do need to figure out what you want. Not just for her, for you." Her words stuck with me as we continued the hike. By the time we reached the end, I felt lighter but also more conflicted than ever. That evening, when I got home, Emily was already dressed to go out. She gave me a quick smile as she grabbed her purse. Heading out with Nicole, she said casually. Don't wait up. Have fun, I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. As the door closed behind her, I felt the weight of her absence settle over me. I pulled out my phone and stared at Sarah's name in my messages. My finger hovered over the keyboard, but I couldn't bring myself to type anything. Instead, I set the phone aside and sat in the quiet, wondering how much further we could stretch before everything snapped. The silence in the house was suffocating. Emily hadn't come home until the early hours of the morning, and when she did, she slipped into bed without a word. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my chest heavy with unspoken thoughts. Was this still our marriage? Or had we already crossed into something else entirely? By midweek, I decided I couldn't take the tension anymore. Emily and I needed to talk. Really talk. That evening, I cooked dinner for the two of us, hoping to create a neutral, comfortable space. When she walked in, she looked surprised but pleased. "This is nice," she said, sitting down at the table. I poured her a glass of wine and took a seat across from her. "We need to talk," I said, keeping my tone as calm as I could. Her smile faltered. "Okay," she said cautiously. "What about?" "About us. About how this is going." I took a deep breath. "Emily, I feel like we're drifting further apart. I want to understand where you are in all of this." She set down her glass, her expression softening. "Ryan, I know this hasn't been easy for you, and I appreciate that you've been willing to try." "That's not what I asked," I said, my voice firmer than I intended. "I need to know if this is actually helping you, or if you've already decided you want something else." Emily's eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked genuinely hurt. "I haven't decided anything," she said. "I told you, this is about figuring out what's missing, and is it missing from me?" I asked bluntly. Her silence was deafening. She looked down at her hands, twisting the stem of her wine glass. "Emily," I pressed, my voice softening. "I overheard you on the phone the other night. You sounded happy, happier than I've seen you in weeks." She froze, her cheeks flushing. "That was Alex," she admitted. "We've been spending time together." I nodded slowly, the confirmation hitting me harder than I expected. "Are you in love with him?" "No," she said quickly. "It's not like that. It's just easy with him. Fun. I don't have to think so much." "And with me you do?" I asked, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "I'm your husband, Emily. If things aren't easy with me, then maybe we should be working on that, not looking for distractions." Her expression hardened. "It's not a distraction, Ryan. It's a chance to figure out what we need, what I need, and what about me?" I countered. "Have you even thought about what I need?" Her eyes narrowed. "You're the one who said you wanted freedom too. So don't act like you've just been sitting at home waiting for me." She wasn't wrong, but the way she said it, like my attempts to keep things together didn't matter, stung. The conversation ended with her storming off to the bedroom, leaving me alone in the kitchen. I stared at the empty plates on the table, my appetite gone. I wanted to fix things, but I was beginning to wonder if they were even fixable. The following weekend, things came to a head. Emily had plans with Alex, and I'd agreed to meet Sarah for coffee. It was supposed to be casual, just a friendly catch-up. But as we sat in the corner of a quiet cafe, talking about everything and nothing, I felt the weight of my situation pressing down on me. "You seem distracted," Sarah said, tilting her head. I sighed. "It's just everything with Emily. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing anymore." Sarah reached across the table, her hand resting lightly on mine. "Ryan, you're allowed to want more for yourself. You deserve to be happy too." Her words were kind, but they carried an edge of finality that made my stomach churn. For a moment, I wondered if I'd let myself care too much about her, if I was becoming exactly what I feared Emily was becoming with Alex. When I got home that night, Emily was already there, sitting on the couch with a glass of wine. She looked up as I walked in, her expression guarded. "We need to talk," she said, echoing my own words from earlier in the week. "Okay," I said, sitting across from her. "I think we're past the point of pretending this is working," she said, her voice steady but sad. "This experiment, it's done more harm than good." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "So where does that leave us?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But I think we need to stop trying to force something that isn't there anymore." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but deep down, I knew she was right. We'd started this experiment hoping to save our marriage, but all it had done was reveal the cracks we'd been ignoring for years. Emily's words hung in the air, heavy and final. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at her, waiting for the sting of them to dull. It didn't. But what could I say? She wasn't wrong. We had been forcing something, trying to patch a relationship that had already begun unraveling. So, what are you saying? I asked finally, my voice quieter than I expected. Are you asking for a divorce? I don't know, she said honestly. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down her glass of wine. I just know that this isn't working, and I don't know if it can be fixed. Her vulnerability struck me. For all the tension and resentment that had built up between us, I could see the pain in her eyes. She wasn't enjoying this. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She was just as lost as I was. The next few days were tense. Emily and I avoided deep conversations, sticking to polite exchanges about work and household chores. We were two people living in the same house, yet occupying entirely separate worlds. One evening, I noticed Emily had left her phone on the kitchen counter. I wasn't proud of it, but curiosity, or maybe fear, got the better of me. I glanced at the screen and saw a string of messages from Alex. I miss you. Can't stop thinking about the other night. When can I see you again? I set the phone down, my stomach twisting into knots. She wasn't just spending time with him. Whatever this was, it had already crossed the line. That night, I confronted her. Emily, are you sleeping with him? I asked bluntly, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. She froze, her expression a mix of guilt and defiance. Ryan, we agreed to this, she said finally. You knew what this could mean? I didn't know it would mean this, I shot back. I didn't know it would mean you'd find someone else and leave me standing here, wondering what the hell I'm still doing in this marriage. Her shoulders sagged, and for a moment, she looked like she might cry. Ryan, I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I didn't plan for it, but it happened, I said, my voice cracking. And now I'm supposed to just what? Pretend it doesn't change anything. That night, I packed a bag and left. I couldn't be in the house with her. Not when every glance, every silence felt like a reminder of how far apart we'd grown. I crashed on Matt's couch, thankful for his no-questions-asked attitude. He didn't pry. He just handed me a beer and turned on the game. You're welcome to stay as long as you need, he said simply. I nodded, grateful but still lost. Over the next week, I started seeing things more clearly. Without the constant presence of Emily or the suffocating weight of our crumbling marriage, I realized just how exhausted I was. For months, maybe years, I had been trying to hold something together that had already fallen apart. Sarah texted me a few times, offering kind words and an ear to listen. I appreciated her support, but I kept my responses brief. I wasn't ready for anything more, and I didn't want to make the same mistakes Emily and I had made in our experiment. Eventually, Emily and I met at a coffee shop to discuss the next steps. She looked tired, her usual bright demeanor dimmed. I wondered if Alex was still in the picture, or if she'd realized he wasn't the solution to her restlessness either. I think we need to separate, she said, her voice steady but sad. For real this time, not just emotionally. I nodded, my chest heavy but calm. I think you're right. There wasn't any anger left, no more accusations or blame. Just two people sitting across from each other, admitting they'd reached the end of a long and complicated road. The months that followed were difficult, but strangely liberating. Emily and I filed for divorce amicably, dividing our assets and saying our goodbyes without the dramatic courtroom battles you see in movies. She moved into an apartment closer to the city, while I stayed in the house. For a while, I avoided Sarah, unsure of whether I was ready to see her again. But eventually, I sent her a message, thanking her for being there during some of my hardest moments. She invited me for coffee, and we talked, not about relationships, but about life, about hiking trails and career ambitions and everything else that didn't feel so heavy. Emily and I kept our distance. I heard through mutual friends that things with Alex didn't last long, but I didn't reach out. I figured she needed to find her own way, just as I was finding mine. The house felt quieter without her, but it also felt more peaceful. I started picking up new hobbies, woodworking, something I'd always been curious about but never had time for. I even joined a hiking group, inspired by Sarah's love of the outdoors. One sunny afternoon, months later, I stood at the top of a ridge, overlooking a valley bathed in golden light. The climb had been tough, but the view was worth it. I felt content, not entirely healed, but on my way. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost or what I'd failed to do. I was thinking about what came next. And for once, I was excited to find out